I know it's been obvious for a while, but in one of my recent videos, I did finally announce our pregnancy with our fifth sweet little baby, and today I'm going to give you an update and just talk more about that. But first, I want to share something that has been a part of my daily routine lately, now that it is, basic girl season, and that is a pumpkin spice latte with a little twist here, because this is an egg yolk latte. So I just started off with some cream and my egg yolk. This recipe's on my blog. Well, the egg yolk latte is on my blog. But I'm giving it, the pumpkin spice twist here. Now, what I just added was actually caramel sauce that I made from my Whey, but you could just do sugar or maple syrup. Then I added a 1/4 teaspoon of pumpkin spice, a teaspoon of pumpkin puree, a scoop of collagen powder, and then blended it all up, kind of pour my coffee over and enjoy. So this is really good filling little kind of meal in a cup when you are an early riser and you're not going to eat breakfast with your kids for a while. This is just a good little way to start your day with protein, fats, carbs. You get just a little bit of everything. And of course, have to be extra and drizzle some extra caramel over top and a little pumpkin spice. Delicious. All right, now on to talking about this pregnancy with our fifth sweet little baby, which I'm just so excited about. I will start off by giving you all just a little recap of this pregnancy so far, and then talk about my birth plans, as well as trying to conceive how, the process of getting pregnant with this baby, and then also prenatal care and nutrition. So right now I am into my second trimester, somewhere in my second trimester. I don't usually share my due date because I don't know, then it kind of gets in my head when that time comes, people are asking me, is the baby here? Is the baby here? And I know people mean well, and I actually love when people are so excited, but for my own sake, I just kind of like to have peace around that time and just, I'm at peace with it. Like whenever the baby comes, the baby comes. So anyway, that's why I don't really share exactly how far along I am or my due date, but I'm in my second trimester. And I am starting to have a lot more good days than bad days. I'm just not one of those people that feels better right when I hit like 12, 13 weeks. It takes me a while for the symptoms of the first trimester to totally ease up. But fortunately, once they do, then I'm great. And I feel great for the rest of pregnancy, like all the way up until I give birth. I just feel great. I have energy and I feel just fine. So I feel so blessed to be able to say that. And honestly, even my first trimester symptoms are very mild. So this pregnancy has been pretty much just like all of my other pregnancies. I have a little bit of mild nausea. I have never vomited, and I just feel so terrible for the women who experience that. That just has to be miserable. So I've never experienced that. Just mild nausea that kind of lasts throughout the day. It's actually worse in the evenings for me. So one thing that I do, knowing that this is my fifth time, one thing that I do to kind of get ahead of that is I try to prepare our meals early in the day. So especially our supper, I want to prepare that as early in the day as possible, because by the time the evening rolls around and I'm in my first trimester, I am very nauseous, I'm very exhausted, and it just feels like my feet are almost stuck in the mud. You guys know what I'm talking about, if you've been pregnant. But really, other than the nausea and the fatigue, I don't have any other crazy symptoms. So no food aversions or crazy cravings or anything like that. Now, being pregnant in my first trimester throughout the busiest part of summer has been challenging, but it hasn't necessarily been a bad thing, because I just haven't had the choice to lay down and give up throughout the day. There's so much that needs to be done around the farm, whether it's with the animals or in the garden, or our kids have a lot of activities in the summer that I just have kind of had to suck it up. And it's been a really good exercise in just foregoing self-pity and just staying disciplined and, just thinking about things aside from how I feel. In our culture, it's so glorified to constantly be reflecting on how we feel. We're constantly looking inward. But can we really say that that has made us happier and healthier as a people? I mean, if you look around, pretty much everyone is on some kind of antidepressant or anxiety medication. It's not a rare thing like it should be, right? It's like common, normal, like it's almost expected that when you become an adult, like adulthood is so stressful that you have to do beyond these things. And people just aren't happy and they're not healthy. And I think a big part of that is all the time we spend looking inward. And I can most certainly be guilty of that at times. In fact, usually when I find myself like in a slump or just being unhappy for a period of time, it's because I'm thinking way too much about how I feel and what I think is wrong with this person or that person or this situation. Whereas if I look outward and just focus on, doing jobs that need to be done, helping others, serving others, then I don't have time to think about how I feel. And believe it or not, you just kind of get through the day and then your head hits the pillow, exhausted, you go to sleep, you wake up, it's a new day, and it is what it is. So it's been a good lesson, maybe spiritually, for me to just kind of reflect on all that and think, I guess I would have the option to take on that, attitude of like, oh, poor me, I don't get to rest very much, but I wasn't going to do that. So it's actually been a really good experience. And I'm so looking forward to going into the fall and winter, which are wonderful seasons of rest here on the farm. And I get to be big pregnant and just cuddled up in my warm clothes and doing lots of resting. So I'm pretty excited about that. Now, otherwise, my first trimesters are very uneventful, mostly because I am planning on another home birth. So this will, Lord willing, this will be my second home birth. My fourth baby, who I had in 2022, was born home here on the farm as well. The 3 before that were in a hospital. So the first 2 were just your, typical hospital setting. The third one was a birth center, like within a hospital. So maybe a little bit different. And just a little recap on my births. My first one, I didn't know anything. I was just like, well, I'll go. The doctor will do what they do and, take care of me. And I just didn't know or really care about anything. But I ended up having my first baby early, so 6 weeks early. And he had to spend time in the NICU. It was a learning experience because it wasn't that pleasant, like, oh, the doctor will take care of everything. There was just a lot going on, a lot of scary situations. And I felt so ill-equipped to advocate for myself and my baby. I just felt kind of helpless. And really that situation is what made me the mom I am today, because now I love being well-informed and educated and able to advocate for myself and my kids and just make, good, well-informed decisions. So I knew after that first experience that I would never get an epidural again, because I just remember that feeling of when I had the baby and they took him away from me. And I said, well, I want to go too. Wherever you're taking him, take me. And they said, oh, well, you could, except you've got the epidural, so we can't let you go yet. And I just remember thinking, oh, I guess you can't. I guess that's policy. I don't know. But I remember thinking that one little thing is keeping me away from my baby. And I thought, I never want this to happen again. If something happens, I want to be able to go with my baby. So that was really my motivation to start having medication-free births. It wasn't this like deep, researching process. It was just a personal experience I had. And so with my second baby, I did it. I just went into the hospital. I hadn't actually researched that much. I just knew, what I wanted from my first experience. Went into the hospital and told them I don't want any IVs or medications. And she's 10 now. So this is 10 years ago. It's like by the grace of God, they agreed to that. Because I think that was pretty rare back then for them not to insist on some kind of IV or something. But, it was just one of those things that God blessed me with this circumstance that it went great. So I just did it. I just had her and I didn't know what to expect with like a natural labor, a natural birth, but it was great. I think my strong motivation of thinking whatever happens to this baby, I just want to be there, was enough to get me through. So it was a great experience in the hospital. Then when it came time for baby number 3, I had actually become really passionate about birth and just done more research. And I was like, I don't think I have any, super crazy risk factors. I think I can do a birth center since I know I'm going to not do the medication thing. So I did the birth center, and that was actually kind of a surprising experience. Because I chose the birth center, I let my guard down. I wasn't really thinking about having to advocate for myself, and I actually ended up experiencing a few negative things where they wanted to do interventions that weren't necessary, and I'm like in transition, hard labor, having to advocate for myself and say, no, I don't need that. I don't want that. And it just wasn't pleasant. So some time went by between that birth center birth, like 5.5 years or 6 years, and my last baby, which I had at home. And so I had plenty of time to research and learn all I could learn about home birth. And I had my home birth. It was great. Now, I did not hire a midwife. And that wasn't originally my intention, but after I started interviewing midwives, I just realized that the credentials weren't what, I guess I just didn't feel like I needed a midwife, because the reason I wanted a midwife was not for somebody to hold my hand and rub my back. I don't like that. My personality is I like to be left alone, like an animal, like a cow that goes off to give birth somewhere quiet. Leave me alone, don't talk to me, don't touch me when I'm having this baby. So I didn't want any of that. I also didn't need somebody to educate me because I had done a lot of the research. I really wanted somebody to be here in case the baby, I know people don't like to talk about this, but you have to think about these things. Like in case the baby needed to be resuscitated, in case I had a postpartum hemorrhage, or in case there was a positioning issue and, we needed help with that. So that would be why I would hire a midwife. And as I started doing interviews, I realized that I had more experience. So I don't know if I've ever shared this on here, but I am a nurse. I've since let my license lapse, but I used to be a registered nurse and have quite a bit of experience in different critical care fields. Anyway, so I just realized I had more experience and, that kind of like emergency care that I would want. And I know how to treat a hemorrhage. I know how to prevent a postpartum hemorrhage. So I just felt like that was the best decision personally for me. Rather than hiring a midwife to do things that I felt comfortable and confident in doing, I would just have my mom and my sister here, to help with giving me drinks or doing other little things, and I would do it myself. It was wonderful. That is what I'm planning on doing again this time. So I manage all of my own care. This leads into the prenatal care part. I do all of my own care. That's why it's a very laid back pregnancy, because I personally like to just check my vital signs kind of periodically anyway, just to make sure that, as I get older, everything's all good. So I can, I'm capable of doing that while I'm pregnant too. So really, when you go to see a midwife, that's one thing they might do is they might check your vital signs. Midwives don't usually do cervical checks. Now that's something I can and have done on myself, but it's not necessary. A midwife might listen to the baby with a Doppler or a fetoscope, and I'm fully capable of doing those things. I can measure my fundal height. I can do all the things that I would get done at a midwife's office. All the things. You can do all those things at home, and that's what I do. So my prenatal care is very straightforward. When I have my little appointments with myself, it's like 5 minutes in my bedroom just to check on everything, and then I'm done. Now, of course, if something comes up throughout the pregnancy that, is cause for concern, I am open to changing my plans. I'll do whatever I feel like I need to do. I have no problem seeking a higher level of care or even hiring a midwife. If I feel like, I'm getting to the end, I'm actually really good. I pride myself on this. I do this for my friends too. I'm really good at identifying the baby's position when they're in the womb. I'm never wrong. I always get it right. So, I'll know before I have the baby if there's going to be a positioning issue. And so if I think there is, then I will just maybe consider getting a midwife just to be here for support, working through that positioning issue. Or if I feel like there's a legitimate problem or complication, then I would see an OB. Something, there are true reasons why you do need a higher level of care. And if you're aware of those reasons, then it's not a big deal to say, okay, I now fall in this category and I need to seek that higher level of care. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with transferring during birth either. If something came up, like a hemorrhage, which I'm pretty confident, I'm not God, I don't know everything, I can't predict everything. Like I said, I do a lot to prevent that. So I'm pretty confident I won't have to worry about it. But if I do, then I have no problem transferring. And, transferring from home to hospital is actually not a big deal. It's not nearly as big of a deal as people think it is. I think it can be a big deal if you are scared of hospitals, or you maybe had it in your mind that that just wasn't going to happen to you. But I don't have that in my mind. Like, I know that I'm just a human being. I'm just a person, and life's not perfect. Life's not perfectly safe. So if life is not perfectly safe, then birth is not perfectly safe, and anything can happen. So the first sign of a complication that is, above what I can handle, I have no problem transferring to a hospital, and it's just not something that's scary to me. So, if you are considering home birth, I really can't stress enough how important it is to think through all of these scenarios. The first thing you need to do is just learn about the normal birth process and, really develop your confidence in that God did make us to do this. He made our bodies to be able to do this and to do this well. And He has built in protective mechanisms to see us through this process. So, birth is normal. However, I do think it's really important, if you're considering home birth, to educate yourself on things that are abnormal, that do come up in labor and birth, and just learn a little bit about those things and think about how you would respond and what the plan would be. You really want to have a plan for every potential situation. And for me, that just removes all anxiety, and it removes any, questioning, like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Because I know if X, Y, or Z comes up, my plan is I'm going to call in a midwife. Or if this comes up, my plan is that I am going to transfer to the hospital. So, even then, I also know that, like I said, I'm not God. I just can't guarantee, I'm a Christian. I don't believe in manifesting, right? So I can't manifest this perfect birth where I control every aspect. There's always, variables and uncontrollables, and you have to be at peace with that. So I think if you can do those things, just educate yourself on normal birth, read positive birth stories, learn about the process, and then also learn a little bit about the variables, the abnormal things that can happen, and make plans. What are you going to do if those things happen? And then last but not least, if you can come to peace with the fact that ultimately God is sovereign and we can't guarantee anything, then you can take away a lot of anxiety around pregnancy, labor, and birth, and really be in a good, peaceful place and just enjoy the process. All right, now I will talk a little bit as well about getting pregnant with this baby. So for our first 3 kids, I was in my early 20s, and it just happened. I was very fertile. I didn't have to try to get pregnant. I just got pregnant, and I honestly always assumed it would always be that way. That's just how it was for me. But then when I got to be in my 30s, now if you have watched my previous videos, I think on one video about, I think it was titled More Babies, something about birth control, I shared a little piece of our story, which is that after our 3rd, my husband did get a vasectomy. Now that's not something that I can talk a lot about because he is very private, but he did get a vasectomy, and then about 5 years later, he did get it reversed. So you can do that. You can get a vasectomy reversed. And then when he got that reversed and we went to try to get pregnant with our fourth baby, it took a while, and I realized that it was actually me. We were not getting pregnant because I was infertile. So I was able to use charting. I used the symptothermal method. You'll just have to look that up, symptothermal method. I'll link some good resources in the description. But I was able to just use charting to kind of figure out why I was infertile. Like, why did I used to be fertile? I still have a uterus, I still have ovaries, I'm still having cycles, and I'm not fertile. Well, by charting, I was able to identify very quickly that I had a luteal phase defect with low progesterone, and I was able to find a natural remedy to fix that. So what I used was Vitex. Now, Vitex is just an herb. It is not like a one-size-fits-all for infertility. So it's not one of those things like, oh, if you're experiencing infertility, just take Vitex and then you'll get pregnant. That's not what this is. It's very, very specific. Vitex is for correcting a luteal phase defect. I'm not going to go into details on what that is. You'll have to look it up. But if that applies to you, if you have a luteal phase defect with low progesterone and that's why you're not getting pregnant, definitely look into Vitex. It is amazing. So that worked for getting pregnant with our fourth baby. And I was kind of curious if I would have to use Vitex again when we wanted to get pregnant again, and I did. So I got my cycle back when I breastfeed my kids for like a long time. So I was, exclusively breastfeeding and didn't get my cycle back until baby number 4 was 11 months old. And then I just waited like 3 or 4 months to see if my cycle was slowly going to regulate on its own and maybe I could get pregnant without having to do the Vitex, but that's not what happened. My cycle was not regulating and I was having severe PMS symptoms. So I actually started taking the Vitex, not just because I wanted to get pregnant again, but also to manage PMS symptoms, because when you have low progesterone, you are very, very likely to experience PMS. And just like last time, it took 3 cycles on Vitex for everything to regulate completely, and I did get pregnant on that 3rd cycle. However, I actually had an early miscarriage. So before I got pregnant with this baby, I did have an early miscarriage. This is my first miscarriage. And so, I feel pretty fortunate. I'm 34 years old that I haven't had one until now. It was still very sad. I was very upset, but fortunately, it wasn't hard on me physically or anything. It was very, very early. So it was, just like having a normal cycle, and I was able to just move on from that physically, didn't need any recovery time or anything. But I was really hopeful that, I was excited that we still could get pregnant and hopeful that we would get pregnant again. And sure enough, the very next cycle, we did get pregnant with this sweet little baby. So we are now 2 for 2 with Vitex. And I have many friends who have used Vitex to conceive several babies. So I actually have a video that is totally dedicated to this topic, to Vitex. So I'll link that in cards for you guys. Check that out if you're interested. Now, as far as prenatal nutrition goes, I do have a blog post going over my prenatal nutrition. I don't take like a prenatal, just like one prenatal with everything in it. I just put together my own supplement routine based on testing that I've done and what I think I need. And what I do every day is beef liver, magnesium. I do a mushroom blend. What else I'm thinking here? Oh, and then I also do selenium and iodine because I have a history of thyroid dysfunction. So that's really, really important to me to do the selenium and iodine. Other than that, it's just a lot of eating really well, eating, really hearty, wholesome food. So lots of raw dairy, lots of fresh free-range eggs, a lot of good quality meat. So lots of animal products, lots of bone broth. Just, if you cook from scratch and eat a lot of real food, it's hard to go wrong. In this day and age with poor soil and air quality and all the toxic stuff that we're exposed to, I do believe there's a lot of room for supplementation. I would like for that not to be the case. I wish I could say that I just ate real food, but I do live in the real world, so that's why I do have supplements to bridge any little gaps. Now, one more thing that I do for prenatal nutrition that I haven't started yet, mainly just because I haven't felt like it, but I will get started on this. Actually, it's two more things, is Nora tea and eating fresh raw garlic every day. Here's why I do those things. So Nora tea is, Nora stands, the N is for nettle, and then oat straw, red raspberry, and alfalfa. This blend is just highly, highly nutritive for both mom and baby. And if you read my blog post on this, on prenatal nutrition, that explains how this is really, really important in preventing postpartum hemorrhage. In fact, I even like to have a little bit of Nora tea brewed and ready to go like when I'm in labor, because it can stop a hemorrhage in its tracks. I also keep some herbs on hand to manage hemorrhage, which, you know, it's something that, because I'm trying to prevent it, I don't plan on having to use, but I have them if I would need them. Now, the second thing that I'm going to start doing here regularly is eating raw garlic every day. And that is not only for just general health and gut health, but it's for prevention of GBS, which is group beta strep. There's a lot of evidence that this is highly effective, and it's not just anecdotal evidence. They've actually isolated GBS and used the active compounds in garlic to kill it, you know, experimentally within a controlled situation in a lab. There haven't been, not at least to my knowledge, there haven't been any super high quality studies in humans, but you know, that's would take a lot of money. It takes a lot of money to fund these studies. And if you think about it, what kind of profit is there in garlic for GBS prevention? Because GBS is very profitable. You know, the testing, the antibiotics, it's just very profitable. I know that might sound crazy if you have no experience or contact with the medical world, but that's how things work. That's how quality studies get done, is somebody has to fund that study, and there has to be a reason. There has to be some motivation for some kind of profit, like some new drug is going to come out of this. So that's why a lot of these natural remedies just don't get studied, which is really unfortunate, because then a lot of people don't take the remedies seriously, even though they're highly effective. So one thing to point out is that the way we treat group beta strep in the United States is very different than it is treated in the rest of the developed world. So I actually don't know of any other developed nations that do universal screening for group beta strep, meaning they screen everyone. In most countries, it's risk-based. So if somebody has a certain risk factor, and you can look this up, then they will offer screening. But in most countries, what they do is it's standard to monitor the baby. Whereas in the United States, we screen everyone, and the screening process is just very questionable. I have a very detailed Instagram post on this, and I'll link it in the description where you can click on it, and it'll go straight to the Instagram post. And it talks about the risk factors of doing GBS screening the way we do it here in this country. It leaves a lot of room for error, number one, and treating every single person who screens positive for GBS with antibiotics and then just forgetting about it is not responsible. It actually leads to a false sense of security that can be deadly for the baby. There have been several cases where a mom screened positive for GBS and then she got antibiotics and the baby still got group beta strep. So she wasn't told what to watch for or how to monitor that baby. Baby got group beta strep, ended up in the NICU or worse. So when I talk about using natural remedies to prevent GBS, I am in no way denying that GBS can be very dangerous or even deadly. Rarely it can be. I'm acknowledging that. What I'm saying is that the best case scenario is that we would prevent it so that it's not even an issue. It's not even something that we have to worry about because the mom is not colonized, so the baby is not going to get it. So if you're curious about all this, you can just Google garlic and GBS. You can click on the link that I put down below and read my very, very detailed Instagram post on this. And I think that wraps it up for my pregnancy update and a little review on birth plans and prenatal care. Next week, it will be back to regularly scheduled content as usual. At some point, probably toward the very end of my pregnancy, the last 2 times I've gone past 40 weeks. So sometime toward the end, I might do another update or just kind of talk a little bit more about preparing for the birth, like what I'm doing to get ready, within the next week or two for the baby's arrival. But until then, I will just be enjoying being pregnant this time of year when we have lots of downtime. And at some point, I'm sure the nesting bug will hit. And, since it will be winter, I will probably take on quite a few projects around the house. I tend to do more of that in the winter anyway, since I have more time inside. I'm sure my winter nesting projects will make their way here onto the channel some way or another. All right, well, thank you guys for watching this week, and I will see you next week.